At first glance, the Strait of Hormuz looks almost insignificant. A narrow ribbon of water squeezed between Iran and Oman, barely noticeable on a world map. But appearances can be dangerously misleading. Every sunrise, hundreds of ships carrying the fuel that powers cities, industries, and entire nations pass through this single corridor. It is one of the few places on Earth where geography alone has the power to reshape the global economy. Military planners don't simply see a waterway here. They see a pressure point capable of influencing the balance of power across continents. That is why aircraft carriers patrol these waters, surveillance aircraft circle overhead, and intelligence agencies monitor every unusual movement. In this region, even a routine naval exercise can send oil markets into panic. But here's what most people never consider. The greatest threat to America's most powerful warships may not come from another superpower's navy at all. It may come from something far smaller, far cheaper, and far harder to stop. Not a missile fired from a warship, not a submarine lurking in the deep, but dozens, sometimes hundreds, of small, fast, unpredictable boats, swarming from every direction at once. This is the tactic that keeps American admirals awake at night. It's called swarm warfare, and Iran has spent decades perfecting it. To understand why this threat is so serious, you have to go back to the late 1980s, to a conflict most people outside the region barely remember. During the Iran-Iraq War, the United States found itself pulled into what became known as the Tanker War, protecting oil shipments from attack in the Persian Gulf. In 1988, after an American warship struck an Iranian mine, the U.S. Navy launched Operation Praying Mantis, a one-day battle that remains the largest surface engagement the Navy has fought since World War II. American forces sank or crippled several Iranian vessels within hours. It was a decisive victory on paper. But for Iran's military planners, the lesson wasn't about the ships they lost. It was about the ships they couldn't afford to build. If they could never match American firepower head-on, they would need a different kind of navy altogether. That realization changed everything. Instead of investing in a handful of expensive destroyers that could be destroyed in a single strike, Iran began building an asymmetric navy, one designed around speed, numbers, and unpredictability. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, a separate force from Iran's conventional navy, took charge of this new strategy. Their weapon of choice wasn't a battleship. It was the Bogomar, a lightweight speedboat capable of reaching speeds over 40 knots, armed with machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, and in more advanced variants, anti-ship missiles. On their own, these boats are almost laughably weak against a warship's armor. But that was never the point. The point was numbers. Picture it this way. A single mosquito is an annoyance. A swarm of 100 mosquitoes attacking from every direction at once becomes something you cannot simply swat away. That is the philosophy behind Iran's naval doctrine in the Persian Gulf. Instead of one large target for American radar and missile defense systems to track, you create dozens of small, fast-moving targets, scattering in unpredictable patterns, forcing a warship's defense systems to make impossible choices in seconds. Even the most advanced radar can become overwhelmed when it has to calculate threat levels for 50 contacts simultaneously, all moving at high speed, some real threats, some decoys. This is where American naval doctrine faces a genuine dilemma. The Aegis Combat System, the technological brain behind most U.S. warships, is extraordinarily good at shooting down missiles, aircraft, and even ballistic threats. It was designed during the Cold War to counter Soviet bomber raids and massed missile attacks. But small boats present a different kind of problem entirely. A standard missile, worth millions of dollars, is not an efficient weapon against a jet ski-sized speedboat worth a few $1,000s. Using it that way would be like trying to swat a fly with a sledgehammer, and doing so over and over in the middle of a swarm attack would drain a ship's magazine long before the threat is neutralized. That's why American warships rely on a layered defense instead. a combination of close-in weapon systems like the Phalanx, essentially a radar-guided Gatling gun capable of firing thousands of rounds per minute, alongside deck-mounted machine guns, electronic warfare systems, and helicopter support. In theory, this layered approach can handle a swarm attack. In practice, it has never been tested in a full-scale, real-world engagement against Iran's actual naval forces. And that uncertainty is exactly what worries military planners the most. War games conducted by the U.S. military, most notably the Millennium Challenge exercise in 2002, revealed just how dangerous this scenario could become. During that exercise, a retired Marine Corps general named Paul Van Riper commanded the opposing force, playing the role of a Gulf state adversary using unconventional tactics. Rather than engaging the American fleet in a traditional battle, Van Riper used swarms of small boats combined with cruise missiles and coordinated surprise attacks. In the simulation's early stages, this asymmetric approach reportedly resulted in the notional sinking of 16 American ships, including an aircraft carrier. The exercise was later restarted with new rules that some critics argued favored the U.S. side, and the results remain debated to this day. But the initial outcome sent a clear message throughout the Pentagon. Even a smaller, less advanced force could inflict devastating losses if it used speed, deception, and overwhelming numbers instead of trying to match American technology directly. Since then, Iran's swarm capabilities have only grown more sophisticated. Modern Iranian fast attack craft, including vessels developed under names like the Paykop and Zulfiqar classes, now carry more advanced weaponry, some equipped with short-range anti-ship missiles capable of striking from several kilometers away. Iran has also invested heavily in coastal defense missile batteries, hidden along the rugged shoreline of the strait, capable of launching on short notice from mobile platforms that are extremely difficult to detect in advance. Combine that with sea mines, which can be deployed quickly and quietly by small vessels, and you begin to understand why American commanders treat this narrow stretch of water with such extreme caution. So what would actually happen if this threat became reality? Picture a single incident, a miscalculation, a boarding gone wrong, or a deliberate provocation, triggering a rapid escalation in the strait. Iranian fast boats could swarm from multiple hidden coves along the coastline within minutes, using the element of surprise before American forces can fully react. Coastal missile batteries could strike simultaneously, forcing American ships to split their defensive attention between missiles in the air and boats on the water. Meanwhile, mines laid days or even weeks earlier could damage vessels attempting to maneuver away from the attack. It would not need to sink a carrier to succeed. Even damaging a warship, or forcing the closure of the strait for just a few days, could send global oil prices soaring and shake financial markets around the world. This is precisely why American naval strategy in the Persian Gulf has shifted so dramatically over the past 2 decades. Instead of relying solely on aircraft carriers, which some analysts argue are simply too valuable and too vulnerable to risk in these confined waters, the Navy has invested heavily in smaller, faster patrol vessels of its own, along with unmanned surface drones designed to detect and track swarms before they can close the distance. The Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain, now dedicates significant resources specifically to countering exactly this kind of threat, running constant patrols, joint exercises, and surveillance operations throughout the strait. The broader consequences of a real conflict here would extend far beyond the battlefield itself. Roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply moves through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. A prolonged closure, even temporary, could trigger immediate spikes in fuel prices worldwide, disrupt global shipping schedules, and rattle stock markets from Tokyo to New York. Nations far removed from the Persian Gulf, from manufacturing hubs in Asia to fuel-dependent economies in Europe, would feel the shock waves almost instantly. This is not simply a regional dispute between two rival powers. It is a scenario capable of touching nearly every corner of the global economy within days. And that is the uncomfortable truth hiding beneath the surface of this story. The United States Navy is, without question, the most powerful naval force in human history. Its ships, its aircraft, and its firepower are unmatched by any single nation on Earth. But raw power does not automatically guarantee victory in every kind of fight. Sometimes the greatest danger isn't the enemy you can see clearly on radar. It's the enemy who understands exactly where your strength becomes your weakness, and who builds an entire strategy around exploiting that